Picture this: a broken piece of clay, weathered by centuries, its surface covered in markings you can't read, or a fragment of bone, carved with symbols that seem to taunt you with their mystery. These aren't just artifacts, they're messages from civilizations that vanished long ago, waiting for someone to crack their code. For centuries, these silent whispers from the past lay scattered across the globe, their stories locked away, until a handful of determined minds dared to listen. This is the story of how lost languages, buried under layers of time and dust, were finally brought back to life, not by magic, but by human brilliance, patience, and an unshakable curiosity that refused to let history stay silent. Think about the odds. A single stone, like the Rosetta Stone, becomes the key to understanding an entire civilization's voice, or a handful of clay tablets, baked and preserved by chance, revealing the thoughts of people who lived thousands of years before us. The journey to decode these languages wasn't just about solving puzzles. It was about reclaiming voices that had been erased, piecing together worlds that had been forgotten. And the most astonishing part, many of these breakthroughs came from nothing more than fragments, scraps of stone, shards of pottery, or even bones marked with symbols no one had seen in millennia. What does it take to hear a language no one has spoken for centuries? It's not just about knowledge, it's about imagination. Picture the scholars who stared at these cryptic marks, seeing not just lines and curves, but the echoes of conversations, laws, love letters, and epic tales. Every stroke they decoded was a step closer to resurrecting a world thought lost forever. From the painstaking work of matching symbols to sounds, to the eureka, a moments when entire scripts suddenly made sense, this story is a testament to what happens when human determination meets the mysteries of the past. So settle in, because by the end of this journey, you'll never look at an ancient artifact the same way again. These fragments aren't just relics, they're invitations to listen, to uncover, and to remember. Languages don't just disappear overnight. They fade slowly, like echoes in a canyon, growing quieter with each passing generation. Imagine a world where Latin wasn't just a relic of textbooks, but a living, breathing language, where people haggled in markets using ancient Sumerian or whispered secrets in Etruscan. Then, over centuries, wars, migrations, and cultural shifts erased these voices, leaving behind only fragments: a merchant's scrawl on a clay tablet, a king's decree etched into stone, or a prayer scratched onto bone. These fragments become time capsules, waiting for someone to pry them open. But here's the real challenge: how do you decode a language when there's no Rosetta Stone to guide you? No bilingual inscriptions, no handy dictionary tucked into a tomb. That's where the true detective work begins. Take Linear B, the script of ancient Mycenaean Greece. For decades, it was just a collection of squiggles on clay tablets, a mystery buried under volcanic ash. Then came Alice Kober, a linguist who spent years cataloging every symbol, every repeated pattern, like a codebreaker mapping out enemy ciphers during wartime. She noticed something others had missed. The symbols weren't just random marks. They hinted at word endings, like footprints leading to a hidden trail. It was painstaking work, counting, comparing, testing theories, but it laid the foundation for the script's eventual decipherment, and sometimes the clues come from the unlikeliest places. The Indus Valley script, etched onto tiny seals and amulets, still defies translation, but researchers noticed something curious. The symbols often appeared near images of animals. Was it a tax record, a prayer, without a bilingual text or living descendants? Every theory is a shot in the dark. Yet even failed attempts teach us something about how languages structure thoughts, how symbols evolve, and why some messages stubbornly refuse to give up their secrets. The deeper you dig, the more you realize these scripts aren't just puzzles to solve. They're windows into entire worldviews. When scholars finally cracked Mayan glyphs, they didn't just translate dates and names, they uncovered histories of conquests, astronomical calculations, even jokes scribbled in the margins by bored scribes. Suddenly, these weren't distant, silent figures from the past. They were people who bragged about their victories, mourned their dead, and told stories under the same stars we see today. That's the magic of decipherment. It doesn't just resurrect words, it resurrects voices. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone wasn't just luck, it was the kind of historical accident that changes everything. Picture this: French soldiers digging fortifications in the Nile Delta, their shovels striking something hard in the mud. At first, it might have seemed like just another rock, but then they saw the inscriptions, 3 scripts covering its surface, each telling the same story in a different language. Greek, the language of scholars; Demotic, the everyday script of ancient Egyptians; and hieroglyphs, those elaborate symbols that had baffled historians for over 1,000 years. In that moment, a door to the past cracked open. But here's what makes the Rosetta Stone so extraordinary: it wasn't just a dictionary, it was a mirror. By lining up the Greek text, which scholars could read, with the hieroglyphs they couldn't, Jean-Francois Champollion and others had something priceless, a way to compare the unknown to the known. Think of it like solving a crossword puzzle where you already have half the answers. Champollion didn't just match words, he unlocked the logic of hieroglyphs themselves. He realized they weren't just picture writing, they combined sounds and ideas like a visual code. When he deciphered the name Ptolemy in the Cartouche, an oval enclosing royal names, it was the first time in centuries that an Egyptian pharaoh's voice was heard clearly. What's often overlooked is how close we came to losing this key forever. The stone was nearly smuggled away during the Napoleonic Wars, hidden under a boat's deck to avoid British capture. And even after it reached the British Museum, progress was agonizingly slow. Champollion spent years wrestling with the script, facing skepticism from rivals who insisted hieroglyphs were purely symbolic, not phonetic. His breakthrough wasn't just about intellect, it was about stubbornness. He worked until his health failed, driven by the belief that these carvings weren't just art, they were someone's words waiting to be read again. The Rosetta Stone's legacy goes beyond Egyptology. It proved that no language is truly lost if you have the right clues and the patience to look for them. Today, we take it for granted that we can read hieroglyphs on temple walls or mummy cases, but without that slab of basalt, entire chapters of human history would still be silent. And yet, it's humbling to remember, the stone itself is just a fragment, a single decree from one moment in time. Imagine how many more Rosetta Stones might still lie buried, holding the keys to scripts we've yet to understand. The stone didn't just unlock hieroglyphs, it unlocked our imagination, showing us that even the most impenetrable codes can fall when curiosity meets persistence. Linear B was more than just markings on clay, it was a riddle wrapped in time, a script so enigmatic that even the greatest scholars of the early 20th century dismissed it as nothing more than crude record-keeping. Found scattered across the ruins of Knossos and other ancient Mycenaean sites, these tablets bore strange symbols, zigzags, loops, and abstract shapes that seemed to taunt anyone who tried to make sense of them. For nearly 50 years, experts debated whether these were mere tallies, religious symbols, or even an entirely unknown language. Then came Michael Ventris, an architect with no formal training in linguistics, only an obsession with codes and a childhood fascination with ancient scripts. What Ventris did next would rewrite history. Instead of relying on guesswork, he approached Linear B like a mathematician, meticulously cataloging every symbol, noting how often they appeared and tracking their patterns. He noticed something curious. Certain symbols clustered together, like repeated endings in modern languages. Could these be grammatical markers? Ventris teamed up with linguist John Chadwick, and together they began testing a radical idea. What if Linear B wasn't some lost, untranslatable tongue, but an early form of Greek? The breakthrough came when Ventris matched a series of symbols to the names of cities known from later Greek history. Suddenly, the tablets weren't just random marks, they were inventories, lists of chariot wheels, jars of olive oil, and even the names of soldiers. One tablet, once decoded, revealed a startling detail, a dedication to the Lady of the Labyrinth, a possible reference to the mythical Minotaur's maze. But Ventris didn't stop there. He realized Linear B was a syllabic script where each symbol stood for a consonant-vowel pair, like puzzle pieces snapping into place. The irony, Ventris wasn't a professional linguist. He was an outsider, a man who worked on blueprints by day and cracked ancient codes by night. His story proves that sometimes the key to unlocking the past isn't just expertise, it's imagination, persistence, and the willingness to question what everyone else assumes is impossible. And the most haunting part, Ventris never lived to see the full impact of his discovery. He died tragically young, but his work ensured that the voices of Mycenaean bureaucrats, traders, and poets silent for over 3,000 years could finally be heard again. Linear B's decipherment did more than solve a puzzle. It shattered assumptions. Before Ventris, many believed the Mycenaeans were illiterate, their culture lost to myth. Now we know they kept meticulous records, worshipped gods that would later evolve into Zeus and Hera, and even wrote poetry, though those tablets may still lie buried, waiting to be found. The story of Linear B isn't just about cracking a code. It's a reminder that history's greatest mysteries often yield to those who dare to look at them differently. High on a sheer cliff face in western Iran, a message from the ancient world looms over the landscape like a silent sentinel. The Behiston Inscription isn't just carved into rock, it's etched into history, a towering testament to the power of language and the lengths humans will go to understand it. Imagine standing at the base of that cliff, squinting up at symbols chiseled over 2,000 years ago, knowing they hold the secrets of empires. This wasn't just any proclamation. Like the Rosetta Stone, it repeated the same decree in 3 languages: Old Persian, the language of kings; Elamite, the tongue of bureaucrats; and Babylonian, the speech of scholars and priests. But unlike the Rosetta Stone, this text wasn't conveniently unearthed and carted off to a museum. It clung to the mountainside, daring anyone to reach it. Enter Henry Rawlinson, a British officer with a linguist's mind and an adventurer's spirit. In the 1830s, he stood at the base of that cliff, staring up at inscriptions 400 feet above the ground. No ropes, no modern climbing gear, just sheer determination. Local legends warned that the cliff was cursed, that no one could scale it and live. But Rawlinson wasn't just after treasure or glory. He was chasing a key, the key to cuneiform, the world's oldest writing system, a script made of wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay by scribes millennia ago. For years, scholars had puzzled over these strange symbols, wondering if they were mere accounting marks or something far richer. Rawlinson believed the Behiston Inscription could settle the debate. His method was as daring as it was simple. He hired local boys to climb ahead of him, hammering wooden pegs into the rock face to create makeshift ladders. Then, clinging to those precarious handholds, Rawlinson would inch his way up, copying each symbol by hand, sometimes dangling over deadly drops to trace a single character. It took him years of returns and near-fatal falls, but eventually he had the entire inscription painstakingly recorded. Back on solid ground, he faced an even greater challenge, making sense of it. The breakthrough came when Rawlinson noticed something eerily familiar. The old Persian section had a rhythm to it, a pattern of repeated words that matched the structure of royal titles in later Persian texts. Slowly, like a cipher giving way, the symbols began to align with sounds. The name Darius emerged, then the names of conquered lands, and finally, the boastful proclamations of a king who wanted his deeds remembered forever. But the real triumph came when Rawlinson realized the Babylonian section wasn't just a translation, it was a Rosetta Stone for the entire Mesopotamian world. Suddenly, the libraries of Nineveh, the law codes of Hammurabi, and the Epic of Gilgamesh weren't just artifacts, they were stories waiting to be read. What makes the Behiston Inscription so extraordinary isn't just its role in deciphering cuneiform, it's the sheer improbability of its survival and its discovery. The cliff face that made it so hard to reach also protected it from weathering and vandalism, preserving it like a time capsule. And Rawlinson's reckless bravery gave scholars the tools they needed to hear the voices of scribes, merchants, and kings who hadn't been understood for centuries. Today, when we read about the grandeur of Babylon or the precision of Assyrian astronomy, we're seeing through a window that Rawlinson pried open, one perilous climb at a time. The inscription's legacy goes beyond translation. It reminds us that history isn't just found, it's fought for. Every wedge-shaped mark on that cliff represents a choice: to listen when others hear silence, to reach when others see only impossibility. And perhaps most remarkably, the Behiston Inscription still stands today, its message now fully understood, a monument not just to a king's power but to the enduring human hunger to unlock the past. Mayan glyphs weren't just decorative symbols, they were a sophisticated writing system hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to see them not as art but as language. For generations, scholars dismissed these intricate carvings as simple pictographs, beautiful but meaningless. After all, how could a civilization without the wheel or metal tools produce something as complex as writing? That assumption crumbled in the mid-20th century, thanks to a Soviet linguist named Yuri Norisov, who made a startling realization while studying a single surviving Mayan book, the Dresden Codex. Norisov's breakthrough came from a simple but radical idea. The glyphs weren't just pictures, they were a mix of logograms, symbols representing whole words, and phonetic signs representing syllables. Imagine trying to read English if some letters stood for sounds while others stood for entire concepts, like a drawing of a sun meaning day, but also sounding out sun in certain contexts. Norisov noticed repeating patterns in the Dresden Codex, clusters of glyphs that appeared near numbers or celestial events. He theorized these weren't random decorations, they were words describing the movements of Venus, the cycles of the moon, and the rituals tied to them. But cracking the code required more than one genius. It took collaboration across decades and continents. Archaeologists like Tatyana Proskoryakov noticed glyphs often appeared near portraits of rulers, suggesting they recorded names and titles. Then came the discovery of Palenque's Temple of the Inscriptions, where an entire royal burial chamber's walls were covered in glyphs. When scholars matched these to dates in the Maya calendar, suddenly, history came alive. The glyphs weren't just about gods and stars, they told of wars, alliances, and the rise and fall of kings. One inscription even revealed a queen's name, Lady Yol Iknul, proving women held power in Mayan society. The real turning point, recognizing that Mayan scribes played with language like poets. They used puns, layered meanings, and even hidden jokes. A glyph might look like a jaguar but sound out a ruler's name when read aloud. This wasn't primitive picture writing, it was a literary tradition as rich as anything from ancient Greece or Egypt. And the Dresden Codex, once seen as a baffling artifact, turned out to be a precise astronomical manual, predicting eclipses centuries in advance. What makes the Mayan decipherment so extraordinary isn't just the intellectual triumph, it's the humanity it uncovered. These glyphs weren't cold records, they were boasts of victory, laments for the dead, and even scribbles by students practicing their strokes. One tablet from Capon shows a clumsy hand, likely a novice's work, reminding us that behind every glyph was a person, someone learning, creating, reaching across time. The Maya didn't just leave behind ruins, they left voices, and thanks to stubborn scholars who refused to see their writing as primitive, we can finally hear them. Of all the unreadable texts in history, none taunt scholars quite like the Voynich Manuscript. Imagine a book filled with looping, alien script curling around illustrations of plants that don't exist, naked women bathing in green liquid, and celestial charts mapping unknown constellations. For over 600 years, this peculiar volume has defied every attempt at translation, surviving wars, fires, and the scrutiny of countless codebreakers, including World War II cryptographers who cracked Nazi ciphers but came up empty-handed with this one. What makes the Voynich manuscript so maddening isn't just its unknown language, it's the eerie precision of it. The script flows with the rhythm of real writing, not random scribbles. Statistical analysis shows patterns found in natural languages, certain symbols repeating like vowels, others clustering like consonants. Yet no one can agree if it's an elaborate cipher, a lost tongue, or an astonishingly detailed hoax. Even the illustrations deepen the mystery. Herbal drawings mix recognizable plants with impossible hybrids, while astronomical diagrams depict celestial alignments that don't match any known epoch. Theories range from plausible to fantastical. Some argue it's a medieval medical text coded to protect secrets from rivals. Others suggest it's a constructed language, an early experiment in artificial communication. Then there's the hoax hypothesis that a clever forger, perhaps Renaissance mystic Edward Kelly, crafted it to swindle a wealthy patron. But here's the twist. Modern carbon dating places the vellum in the early 15th century, and the ink matches period recipes. If it's a fake, it's an impossibly old one, predating any known motive for such an elaborate ruse. The frustration lies in the glimpses of meaning that slip away. In 2017, a researcher claimed the script was a form of abbreviated Hebrew, but the translations yielded fragmented, surreal phrases like, "She made recommendations to the priest," alongside plant names, hardly the epic revelation hoped for. Another team suggested it was a proto-Romance language, yet their decoded passages read like disjointed word salad. Each new theory sparks excitement, then crumbles under scrutiny. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the Voynich manuscript is exactly what it appears to be, a genuine, complex work from a culture or tradition that vanished without leaving another trace. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or Linear B, there's no bilingual key, no related scripts to compare it to, just 340 fragile pages of unanswered questions. It's a reminder that for all our breakthroughs, some doors to the past remain stubbornly locked, and maybe that's the point. The Voynich manuscript isn't just a puzzle to solve. It's a test of how comfortable we are with mysteries that refuse to yield. Rongorongo isn't just another undeciphered script, it's a cultural enigma carved into wood, a whisper from a civilization that thrived in isolation on one of the most remote islands on Earth. Picture these tablets, uneven slabs of dark Toromiro wood, etched with rows of intricate glyphs resembling birds, plants, and strange geometric forms. all arranged in a pattern that reverses direction with each line, like a farmer plowing a field back and forth. Discovered on Easter Island in the 19th century, these tablets are the only known examples of a writing system from anywhere in Polynesia, a region where oral tradition dominated. But here's the mystery: no one alive today knows how to read them. Were they sacred hymns, genealogies, or even astronomical records? Or were they something else entirely, not writing at all, but a kind of memory aid like knots on a string, meant to jog the recollection of a trained storyteller? The challenges of deciphering Rongorongo are staggering. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or the Behiston Inscription, there's no bilingual text to compare it to, no living descendants who recognize its sounds. Even the name Rongorongo is a puzzle. It's a term recorded by missionaries who said it meant to recite or to chant. But whether that refers to the script itself or the act of performing its contents is unclear. Making matters worse, most of the tablets were burned or repurposed after European contact, leaving only a handful of damaged fragments. The few that survive are scattered across museums worldwide, their original context lost. Scholars have tried every tool in the decipherment arsenal. Some noticed that certain glyphs repeat in clusters, suggesting they might represent names or titles. Others pointed out that the calendar theory, the idea that the tablets track lunar cycles, fits with Polynesian traditions of celestial navigation. But without a key, every hypothesis hits the same wall. Even the direction of reading is debated. The glyphs are carved in reverse boustrophedon, meaning each line flips upside down and runs the opposite way, like a typewriter carriage returning while shifting gears. Was this a stylistic choice, or did it hold deeper meaning? The most tantalizing clue comes from an unlikely source: a 19th century missionary's report claiming that an islander once chanted while pointing to glyphs on a tablet. If true, it would prove Rongorongo was more than imagery. But without a recording or transcript, the moment is lost to time. Today, computer algorithms analyze the glyphs for statistical patterns, hoping to uncover grammatical structures, but progress is slow. The irony is haunting. Easter Island's Moai statues were meant to make the ancestors immortal, yet the Rongorongo tablets, their true voices, remain silent. What makes Rongorongo so captivating isn't just the linguistic challenge. It's the lingering question of why writing emerged there at all. Most Polynesian cultures thrived without it, relying on oral traditions passed down through generations. Did contact with Europeans prompt its creation, or was it a local innovation, a way to preserve knowledge as the island's ecosystem collapsed? The answer might rewrite our understanding of human ingenuity. For now, the tablets sit in glass cases, their messages locked away, reminding us that some puzzles resist even the most determined minds. And perhaps that's fitting. On an island famous for mysterious giants staring at the horizon, the last unsolved script guards its secrets just as stubbornly. The Indus Valley script is one of history's most tantalizing enigmas, a language etched into tiny stone seals, pottery fragments, and copper plates, yet silent for over 4,000 years. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or Linear B, there's no bilingual inscription to crack the code, no descendant language to trace its sounds. Just over 400 distinct symbols, some resembling stick figures, animals, or abstract shapes, arranged in short sequences that seem to follow rules but refuse to reveal their meaning. What were these markings for? A king's decree, a merchant's inventory, or something far more mysterious? What makes the Indus script so frustrating for linguists is its brevity. Most inscriptions are just 5 or 6 symbols long, too short for statistical analysis to detect the patterns that unlocked other ancient languages. Some researchers argue it's not writing at all but proto-writing, a system of symbols used for accounting or rituals, like the Incas' knotted quipu. Others point to the symbol's consistency across hundreds of miles, suggesting a standardized system. Then there's the tantalizing discovery of a single long inscription, the Dolivera signboard, a 10-symbol sequence carved into a wooden slab, hinting at something more elaborate. But without context, even this rare find is a locked door with no key. One theory suggests the script is logosyllabic, like Sumerian cuneiform, where symbols represent both words and sounds. Computer analysis shows certain symbols often appear at the beginning of sequences, like titles or names, while others repeat in ways that suggest grammatical endings. But without knowing the underlying language, it's like trying to solve a crossword puzzle in the dark. Even the direction of writing is debated. Some seals read right to left, others left to right, as if the scribes themselves were experimenting. The biggest obstacle, the Indus Valley civilization left no Rosetta Stone, no conqueror's monument bragging in multiple tongues. When the civilization declined around 1900 BC, its cities were abandoned and its language, if it was a language, faded with them. Modern efforts to decipher it range from the meticulous to the wildly speculative. In the 1960s, a Finnish team claimed to link the script to Dravidian languages, but their translations were met with skepticism. More recently, AI algorithms have scoured the symbols for patterns, yet even machines struggle with so little data. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the script isn't meant to be read in isolation. Some researchers believe the symbols worked alongside oral tradition, like musical notation, a prompt for storytellers rather than a standalone text. Imagine a merchant holding a seal, its markings reminding him of a deal sealed with a handshake and a spoken vow. Without that living voice, the symbols are just echoes. The Indus script's stubborn silence teaches us something profound about language. It's not just marks on a surface. It's a living bridge between minds, and when that bridge collapses, even the most elegant symbols become ghosts. For now, these 4,000-year-old whispers remain just that, whispers. But every unanswered question is also an invitation. Somewhere, buried in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro or hidden in an unstudied artifact, the key might still be waiting. Computers are rewriting the rules of decipherment, turning what was once a painstaking art into a high-speed science. Imagine feeding thousands of ancient symbols into an algorithm that can spot patterns invisible to the human eye, repetitions, clusters, even subtle grammatical structures hidden in the chaos. That's exactly what's happening in labs around the world, where artificial intelligence is now the newest recruit in the fight to resurrect lost languages. Take the Phaistos disc, that infamous clay circle from Bronze Age Crete, stamped with spiraling symbols that have baffled scholars for over a century. Recent computational projects have analyzed every curve and dot, comparing them to known scripts from Anatolia to Egypt, searching for statistical echoes that might finally reveal its message. But AI doesn't just compare symbols, it thinks like a linguist. Machine learning models trained on deciphered scripts can predict how unknown languages might behave. For example, if a symbol appears frequently at the start of words, it might be a vowel or a common prefix. If certain glyphs cluster together, they could form grammatical endings. These digital detectives don't get tired, don't overlook details, and can process centuries' worth of data in days. When researchers applied these techniques to the Indus Valley script, they found surprising regularities, symbols that behaved like verbs or nouns, hinting at a structured language rather than random marks. The real game changer, cross-cultural analysis. Computers can now scan scripts separated by continents and millennia, searching for faint connections. Could the symbols on Easter Island's Rongorongo tablets share DNA with ancient Chinese oracle bones? Could the Voynich manuscript's odd letter shapes mirror medieval European ciphers? These aren't just wild guesses, they're testable hypotheses, thanks to algorithms that map linguistic evolution like a family tree. One project even reconstructed proto-languages, the ancestral tongues that gave rise to modern ones, by simulating how sounds shift over time. Yet for all their power, computers aren't magic. They need human guidance, someone to ask the right questions. Take the case of Linear A, the still undeciphered predecessor to Linear B. AI has identified possible phonetic values for its symbols, but without a bilingual text or known descendant language, even the smartest algorithm hits a wall. That's why the future of decipherment isn't just machines replacing scholars, it's collaboration. A researcher might notice that certain glyphs appear near depictions of olive oil jars, suggesting a trade record, then task AI with scouring every known example for confirmation. The most exciting part, we're just scratching the surface. New imaging techniques can recover faded ink on 1,000-year-old parchment, while 3D modeling reveals indentations invisible to the naked eye. Projects like the Vesuvius Challenge are using particle accelerators to virtually unroll carbonized scrolls from Herculaneum, their texts preserved but unreadable since the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. With every technological leap, another piece of the past inches closer to being heard. The digital age isn't just speeding up decipherment, it's redefining what's possible, one algorithm at a time. Epigraphy isn't just about reading ancient texts, it's about rescuing them from the brink of oblivion. Picture a weathered stone tablet, its surface pitted by centuries of rain and wind, the once crisp carvings now barely visible to the naked eye. This is where the epigrapher steps in, armed not with a chisel but with cutting-edge tools that bridge the past and present. High-resolution photography captures every groove and shadow, while 3D scanning builds digital models so precise you can virtually run your fingers over indentations made millennia ago. But the real magic happens with reflectance transformation imaging, or RTI. This technique takes dozens of photos under different lighting angles, then combines them to reveal hidden details, like a faded signature suddenly leaping off the page under a flashlight's glare. The work is painstaking. Before a single symbol can be translated, epigraphers must become detectives of texture. They map cracks, stains, and even the tool marks left by ancient scribes, clues that tell us not just what was written, but how. Take the Maya stele of Capon, where researchers used RTI to uncover corrections made by the carvers themselves. Beneath the final glyphs, faint lines showed where mistakes had been scraped away, proving these weren't just impersonal monuments but works in progress, shaped by human hands. Preservation is just as crucial as discovery. In the deserts of Jordan, inscriptions on sandstone cliffs face erosion from sandstorms and salt crystallization. Here, epigraphers use silicone molds to create perfect reproductions before the originals crumble. It's a race against time, one that recently saved the ancient city of Petra's Nabatean inscriptions, some of which had already faded beyond recognition. But epigraphy's greatest challenge, deciding what to prioritize. With thousands of inscriptions awaiting documentation, choices must be made. A shopping list scrawled on a Roman potsherd might seem trivial until you realize it mentions prices for exotic spices, revealing trade routes lost to history. Meanwhile, a royal decree carved into a temple wall could rewrite our understanding of a dynasty's collapse. Every mark tells a story, and epigraphers are the ones ensuring those stories aren't erased by time. The next time you see a photo of an ancient inscription, remember, behind that image lies hours of work adjusting light filters, stitching together scans, and sometimes dangling from ropes to reach a cliffside text. These scholars aren't just translators, they're the guardians of voices that refuse to be silenced. And with every inscription they preserve, another piece of humanity's collective memory is pulled back from the edge of forgetting. Paleography isn't just about reading old handwriting. It's about stepping into the minds of scribes who haven't held a pen in centuries. Imagine unrolling a medieval parchment, its ink faded to brown, letters crowded together in a script so dense it looks like a wall of thorns. At first glance, it's incomprehensible, but to a paleographer, every stroke tells a story. Take the humble abbreviation, for example. Medieval monks didn't just shorten words to save space, they developed an entire system of symbols like a secret code. A tiny squiggle above a letter might stand for M or N, while a horizontal line could mean per or pro. Deciphering these isn't just translation, it's archaeology for ink. The real challenge: scribes weren't machines. They made mistakes, skipped words, repeated lines, even doodled in the margins. One 9th century copyist, frustrated with his work, scrawled, "The parchment is hairy," in the corner of a Latin manuscript. These errors are gold to paleographers. They reveal how texts were copied, who was doing the copying, and even the conditions they worked in. A shaky hand might mean a cold scriptorium, while sudden changes in ink suggest interruptions, maybe a meal break or a prayer bell. Then there's the evolution of scripts themselves. Carolingian minuscule, introduced under Charlemagne, was the medieval equivalent of switching to a clean, modern font, a revolution in readability. But earlier scripts like Merovingian cursive look like spaghetti tossed on a page with letters slurred together in haste. To untangle them, paleographers study stroke order, the direction a quill moved, like detectives analyzing brushstrokes in a painting. Sometimes the key lies in the parchment itself. Holding a page to the light might reveal guidelines scratched by the scribe, or even traces of erased text beneath, proving that even 1,000 years ago, people recycled writing surfaces. Paleography's magic lies in its intimacy. When you decipher a Roman shopping list scratched on a potsherd, you're not just reading olive oil and fish sauce. You're standing in a Pompeian marketplace, hearing the clink of coins. A misspelled word in a Viking runestone isn't an error. It's evidence of how language sounded in the carver's dialect. These texts weren't meant for us, yet here we are, eavesdropping across millennia. The discipline's greatest triumph, rescuing texts once deemed lost. In the 1800s, scholars discovered the Archimedes palimpsest, a prayer book overwritten on recycled parchment. Beneath the hymns, faint traces of the original Greek mathematics remained. Using multispectral imaging, they recovered Archimedes' work on infinity, a concept centuries ahead of its time. Without paleography, those insights might have stayed buried under layers of ink and time. What makes ancient handwriting so captivating isn't just the content, it's the humanity. A scribe's cramped fingers, a monk's inkblot, a merchant's hurried scrawl, these aren't imperfections. They're signatures, proof that behind every text was a person, rushing or pausing, making art or just getting through the day. And thanks to paleographers, their voices, inked, imperfect, enduring, still echo today. Bilingual texts are the skeleton keys of linguistics, unlocking doors that would otherwise stay shut forever. Think about it. How do you decipher a language when no one alive has spoken it for centuries? You need a reference point, something to bridge the gap between the unknown and the familiar. That's where bilingual inscriptions come in, acting like ancient cheat sheets left behind by history itself. The Rosetta Stone and the Behiston Inscription are the rock stars of this category, but they're not alone. From the tomb of a Phoenician king to a humble tax receipt scribbled in Greek and Aramaic, these parallel texts are the closest thing we have to time machines for language. Take the Rosetta Stone. Without its Greek translation, hieroglyphs might still be a mystery today. but what's often overlooked is how fragile that key almost was. The stone isn't pristine, it's broken, with chunks missing. What if the Greek section had been lost, or worse, what if the scribes had decided to write 3 completely different decrees instead of one repeated in 3 scripts? That's the razor-thin margin between breakthrough and eternal obscurity. The same goes for the Behiston Inscription. Carved into a cliff face in 3 languages, it was Rawlinson's lifeline to cuneiform. But imagine if erosion had wiped out the Old Persian portion, leaving only the untranslated Elamite and Babylonian. Would we still be staring at those wedge-shaped symbols, clueless? Bilingual texts don't just give us words, they reveal how languages think. When scholars compared the Greek and hieroglyphic versions of the Rosetta Stone, they noticed something unexpected. The Egyptian script wasn't a direct translation. It was adapted with honorifics and flourishes tailored to cultural norms. This wasn't just a dictionary, it was a snapshot of how 2 civilizations expressed power and piety differently. The same nuance appears in the Behiston Inscription. Darius the Great's boasts in Old Persian are more elaborate than the Babylonian version, hinting at how empires tweaked their messaging for different audiences. But here's the twist: bilingual texts are rarer than you'd think. For every Rosetta Stone, there are a dozen scripts like Linear or Rongorongo, stranded without a linguistic anchor. That's why discoveries like the Karat bilingual stone slabs from 8th century Turkey with identical texts in Phoenician and Luwian send scholars into a frenzy. They're not just academic curiosities, they're lifelines. When archaeologists unearthed a tablet in ancient Ugarit with Akkadian and Sumerian side by side, it didn't just decode Ugaritic cuneiform, it illuminated how scribes in the Bronze Age trained by copying centuries-old Sumerian texts, like medieval monks transcribing Latin. The real power of these parallel texts lies in their humility. They weren't created for future linguists, they were practical, tax records, treaties, royal propaganda. A merchant in Memphis didn't carve prices in Greek and Demotic to help scholars 2,000 years later. He did it so everyone in a multilingual market could understand. That mundanity is what makes them so precious. They're accidental gifts frozen in stone or clay, whispering, "Here's how we spoke, here's how we traded. Here's how we ruled." And when we're lucky enough to find them, they don't just crack codes, they dissolve the barriers between us and the past, one translated word at a time. Yet for all their brilliance, bilingual texts are just the beginning. They give us the alphabet, but we still have to write the story. The Rosetta Stone unlocked hieroglyphs, but it took Champollion years of grinding work to move beyond names and into poetry, law, and daily life. The Behiston Inscription revealed cuneiform's grammar, but understanding the Epic of Gilgamesh required piecing together fragments from libraries across Mesopotamia. These inscriptions are sparks, brilliant, fleeting, and it's up to scholars to fan them into flames. So the next time you see a weathered stone with parallel columns of text, remember, you're not looking at a relic. You're looking at a conversation, one that's been waiting centuries for someone to listen. And with every script these bilingual keys unlock, another voice from the past finally gets its turn to speak. Decoding an ancient script isn't just about matching symbols to sounds, it's about hearing the ghost of a language's rhythm, its quirks, its very soul. Linguists don't just translate words, they reverse engineer entire grammatical systems, tracing how verbs conjugate, how nouns decline, and how sentences dance to rules no one's spoken aloud for millennia. Take the case of Hittite, a language carved into clay tablets in Bronze Age Anatolia. When scholars first encountered it, the script was readable cuneiform wedges borrowed from Mesopotamia, but the language itself was a mystery. Then came the realization, certain word endings changed predictably, echoing patterns found in distant relatives like Latin and Greek. Suddenly, Hittite wasn't an isolated tongue. It was a long-lost cousin of languages still spoken today, part of the Indo-European family tree. The magic lies in what linguists call comparative reconstruction. By analyzing living languages, their sounds, their structures, they can work backward like detectives piecing together a shattered vase. Every language leaves fingerprints. The way P sounds in Latin might become F in Germanic tongues, think pater becoming father. These sound shifts aren't random, they follow rules as precise as chemical reactions. When linguists noticed Etruscan inscriptions often placed objects before verbs, unlike neighboring Latin, it hinted at a grammar wholly alien to Indo-European minds. Even without a Rosetta Stone, such clues can reveal a language's DNA. But grammar is only half the battle. Phonetics, the study of speech sounds, turns symbols into living speech. Consider Egyptian hieroglyphs. Before Champollion, scholars assumed they were purely pictorial. But by comparing Greek names on the Rosetta Stone to their hieroglyphic counterparts, he spotted phonetic clues. A bird symbol not representing an actual bird, but the sound ah in Ptolemy. This was the game changer. Languages aren't just ideas, they're sounds shaped by lips, tongues, and breath. Reconstructing those sounds means listening to echoes. Linguists debate whether linear A symbols rolled off the tongue with the melodic lilt of Minoan priests or the staccato bark of traders haggling for copper. The most thrilling breakthroughs come when linguists spot cognates, words shared across languages like genetic markers. The word for water in Hittite, water, mirrors Old English, weta, and Sanskrit, yuden. These aren't coincidences, they're fragments of a proto-language, a mother tongue spoken thousands of years before writing existed. Reconstructing Proto-Indo-European, the hypothetical ancestor of everything from English to Sanskrit, is like assembling a cosmic jigsaw where half the pieces are missing. Yet linguists have pieced together startling details. It likely had words for wheel and axle, suggesting its speakers were mobile, innovative. Yet for all its precision, linguistics is also an art. Decipherers must balance cold data with intuition. When Michael Ventris proposed Linear B was Greek, many scoffed Mycenaeans weren't supposed to be literate. But Ventris trusted the patterns, symbols repeating where Greek would demand pronouns, verbs aligning with later Hellenic forms. His gamble rewrote history. Similarly, Mayanist David Stewart noticed glyphs for sky and snake sometimes swapped places, a pun only possible if both words sounded alike in ancient Mayan. Such leaps require more than algorithms. They demand a feel for how language plays, bends, and breathes. The beauty of linguistic decipherment, it's never just about the past. Every reconstructed sound, every past sentence, reshapes our understanding of human thought itself. When we learn that Sumerian scribes used the same word for open and decide, or that Egyptian hieroglyphs conflated sun and time, we're glimpsing how ancient minds categorized their world. Languages aren't just codes to crack, they're maps of consciousness, drawn by people who laughed, argued, and dreamed under the same stars we do. And with every syllable linguists resurrect, those voices grow louder, bridging the chasm between then and now. Counting symbols might sound like tedious work, but for codebreakers of ancient scripts, it's the closest thing to a time machine. Imagine staring at a tablet covered in strange marks, with no dictionary, no Rosetta Stone, just patterns waiting to be noticed. That's where frequency analysis comes in, a technique so powerful it's cracked everything from medieval ciphers to the secrets of Egyptian scribes. Here's how it works. The most common symbols in any language tend to be vowels or everyday words like and, or, the. In ancient scripts, recurring glyphs often point to titles like king or god, or even the names of cities and deities. It's like listening for the chorus in a song you've never heard before. The parts that repeat hold the key to the whole melody. Take Linear B, for example. Before Michael Ventris deciphered it, scholars had no idea what the symbols meant. But by meticulously counting how often each glyph appeared, Ventris noticed something crucial. Certain symbols clustered at the ends of words, much like verb endings in Greek. Others popped up frequently before pictograms of commodities, olive oil, wheat, or chariots. These weren't random scratches, they were grammatical signposts. By mapping these patterns, Ventris could guess that a particular symbol might stand for a vowel, while another represented a syllable like to or my. It was detective work of the highest order, where every tally mark brought him closer to hearing a language no one had spoken in 3,000 years. Frequency analysis isn't just about raw numbers, though. Context matters. In Mayan glyphs, scholars noticed that certain symbols appeared exclusively in royal names or dates, acting like visual fingerprints for power. The glyph for Ahor, meaning Lord, wasn't just common, it was predictable, showing up in coronation texts and victory monuments. Similarly, in Egyptian hieroglyphs, the looping Ankh symbol appeared everywhere, from temple walls to love poems, but its meaning shifted depending on its neighbors. Alone, it meant life. Paired with a god's name, it became a blessing. The same symbol could be a word, a sound, or even a pun, proving that frequency alone isn't enough. You need to read between the lines. The real genius of this method, it doesn't require a bilingual text. When researchers tackled the Indus Valley script, they used computers to analyze thousands of seal inscriptions, hunting for statistical fingerprints. Symbols that appeared at the start of sequences might be titles, while those at the end could be numerals or signatures. Even without knowing the underlying language, these patterns hinted at a structured system, not random doodles, but a script with rules. The same approach is now being applied to Rongorongo, where certain glyphs repeat in rhythmic sequences, suggesting poetic meter or chanted verses. But here's the catch: frequency analysis can lead you astray if you're not careful. Early attempts to decipher Etruscan assumed it was close to Latin, leading to embarrassing mistranslations. Only when scholars accepted its uniqueness did the script's true structure emerge. Likewise, the Voynich Manuscript symbols follow Zipf's law, a linguistic pattern found in natural languages, yet no one's convinced it's not a hoax. Statistics can reveal a script skeleton, but it takes intuition to clothe it in meaning. What makes this work so thrilling is its unpredictability. A symbol that looks like a bird might not mean bird at all. It could stand for a sound, a month, or even a pun. When Alice Kober studied Linear B, she didn't just count symbols, she mapped their relationships, creating grids that revealed how endings changed with grammar. Her notebooks, filled with hand-drawn tables, were less like ledgers and more like blueprints for a dead language's resurrection. Today, AI speeds up this process, but the principle remains the same. Every mark, every repetition, is a clue left by someone who never imagined we'd be listening. So the next time you see an ancient inscription, remember, beneath those weathered lines lies a rhythm, a cadence waiting to be heard. And with the right tools, patience, and a little statistical magic, even the quietest whispers from the past can find their voice again. A broken clay tablet found in the ruins of a Babylonian temple tells a very different story than one dug up from a merchant's house, even if both bear the same script. Context isn't just background noise in decipherment. It's the Rosetta Stone's quieter cousin, whispering hints about a word's meaning based on where it sits, who might have used it, and what surrounded it. Imagine uncovering a stone slab covered in Etruscan script near an ancient wine press. Even if you can't read a single symbol, the location screams harvest records or offering to Dionysus louder than any translation. Take the famous Ugaritic tablets discovered in the 1920s in what's now Syria. These weren't random finds, they lay in the ruins of a scribble school, surrounded by dictionaries and practice exercises. One tablet listed the same phrase in Sumerian, Akkadian, and Ugaritic, like a prehistoric language textbook. The context didn't just help decode Ugaritic, it revealed how Bronze Age scribes trained, showing us the messy process of learning a dead language even in antiquity. Nearby, tablets about shipbuilding and trade hinted at Ugarit's role as a bustling port, turning symbols into living records of tariffs and timber. But context works in subtler ways too. The Phaistos disk, that mysterious clay circle from Crete stamped with spiraling symbols, might never be fully understood, but we know it was found in a palace storeroom alongside ceremonial objects. That single detail shifts theories from shopping list to royal decree or religious hymn. Even the material matters. A law code carved into basalt was meant to last. A tax receipt scrawled on a potsherd was disposable. The medium carries its own message before a single symbol is read. Sometimes the smallest objects hold the biggest clues. In the Indus Valley, tiny stone seals etched with script often depict unicorn-like creatures. Found near trade goods, they likely functioned like merchant signatures, a blend of writing and branding. Similarly, Maya glyphs carved into jade pendants weren't just labels. The stone's rarity suggests they adorned royalty, turning names into heirlooms. Context transforms symbols from abstract marks into social acts, a king's boast, a lover's vow, or a trader's mark of pride. The real power of contextual clues. They don't require bilingual texts or lucky breaks. When researchers found Linear B tablets stacked beside chariot wheels in a Mycenaean palace, the symbols nearby suddenly made sense. Chariot repairs, month 3. A temple wall covered in repetitive glyphs, probably hymns or rituals. Even the Voynich Manuscript's bizarre illustrations, herbal plants next to zodiac signs, suggest an astrological or medical purpose, however cryptic. Yet context can also deceive. An Egyptian papyrus might mix love poetry with laundry lists, proving ancient people didn't compartmentalize writing like we do. And sometimes objects migrate, a sacred text reused as rubble, or a king's seal dropped in a farmer's field. That's why the best decipherers treat context like a compass, not a map. It points you in the right direction, but you still have to walk the path. What makes this approach so thrilling is its humanity. A scribe's doodle in the margin, a wine stain on a contract, or the wear patterns on a frequently consulted tablet. These aren't just data points. They're fingerprints left by real lives waiting to be noticed. When we read a Mesopotamian prayer and find the clay still indented where the scribe rested their wrist, translation isn't just about words. It's about reaching across time to touch the very moment those words were written. Rebus writing turns the world into a playground of sound and symbol, where an owl might hoot the letter M or a loaf of bread could whisper T. This clever trick, using pictures to represent sounds rather than objects, is how countless ancient scripts transformed art into language. Hieroglyphs are the most famous example, but the principle is universal. When a culture needs to write abstract ideas or names that can't be drawn, they borrow sounds from the world around them. Picture an Egyptian scribe scratching a feather onto papyrus. At first glance, it's just an image until you realize that feather, pronounced shut in ancient Egyptian, also sounds like their word for emptiness. Suddenly, that feather isn't a thing. It's a syllable, a building block for words far beyond its literal meaning. The magic of Rebus writing lies in its flexibility. A bee followed by a leaf doesn't describe insects and foliage, it might spell out belief. The Maya took this even further, crafting glyphs that could be read multiple ways. A jaguar's head might stand for the word Balaam, but it could also represent just the syllable ba, depending on context. This fluidity let scribes encode wordplay into their texts, turning royal names into visual puns. One Mayan king's title combined glyphs for sky and fire, not because he ruled over thunderstorms, but because together they sounded like Voinish, a sacred solar epithet. But Rebus's thinking isn't just ancient history. Modern emojis use the same principle, a picture of an eye followed by a heart, and a U-shape spells I love you. Early Chinese oracle bones did it too, adapting pictograms of mountains and rivers into phonetic components. Even children's puzzles rely on this instinct. Draw a cat plus a sailboat, and you've spelled catamaran. The human brain seems wired to hear images, bridging the gap between concrete and abstract. What makes this system so revolutionary is its efficiency. Instead of inventing thousands of unique symbols, cultures could repurpose a few hundred pictures into an entire phonetic toolkit. The Rosetta Stone's cartouches reveal this brilliantly. The hieroglyphs for Ptolemy include a mat pronounced P, a rope loop T, and a lion L, assembling his name like oral Legos. Yet for all its ingenuity, Rebus's writing had limits. Homophones, words that sound alike but mean different things, could create confusion. An Egyptian owl glyph might mean M or the actual bird, requiring determinatives, extra symbols that clarify meaning to keep things straight. The Rebus principle's greatest legacy, it proves that writing isn't just about recording speech, it's about playing with it. When a Sumerian scribe used an arrow, tai, to write the word life, also tai, they weren't just economizing. They were celebrating language's musicality, turning scripts into symphonies of sight and sound. Today, as we text with emojis or decode ancient glyphs, we're still following their lead, listening to the whispers hidden in every line and curve where pictures don't just show, they sing. For every Rosetta Stone moment, there are a dozen decipherments that crumble under the weight of their own ambition. The history of decoding ancient scripts is littered with bold claims that promise to rewrite history, only to dissolve under peer review. Take the Phaistos disc, that enigmatic clay circle stamped with spiraling symbols from Bronze Age Crete. Since its discovery in 1908, it's been called everything from a prayer to a shopping list to an ancient board game. One scholar declared it a hymn to the mother goddess, another swore it was a calendar, but the truth, after more than a century of analysis, no theory holds up. The disc's 45 unique symbols appear nowhere else in Minoan archaeology, and its short, repetitive sequences defy statistical patterns found in known languages. It's a linguistic island, isolated and inscrutable, a reminder that not every artifact is meant to be solved. Then there's the Vinci symbols, etched into Neolithic pottery from the Balkans over 7,000 years ago. Some researchers argue these marks represent the world's oldest writing, predating Sumerian cuneiform by millennia. But here's the catch: without longer texts or contextual clues, they could just as easily be potter's marks, ritual symbols, or even doodles. The allure of declaring them writing is strong. It would upend our understanding of cultural evolution, but science demands more than wishful thinking. Real decipherment requires cross-verification, matching symbols to sounds, grammar to structure, and context to content. The Vinci symbols, like so many others, remain tantalizingly out of reach. The danger isn't just in being wrong, it's in the damage done along the way. In the 1950s, a self-taught linguist claimed to have cracked the Indus Valley script by linking it to Sanskrit, despite overwhelming evidence that the civilization predated Indo-European influence by centuries. His translations, filled with grand proclamations about sun gods and horse sacrifices, were debunked, but not before muddying the waters for legitimate research. Similarly, the infamous Greek readings of Rongorongo in the 1920s turned out to be pure fantasy, projecting European expectations onto Polynesian culture. These false leads aren't harmless. They distort history, waste resources, and overshadow quieter, more rigorous work. What separates breakthroughs from dead ends? Peer review, the unglamorous backbone of academic progress. When Michael Ventris proposed his Greek solution for Linear B, he didn't just publish a book and declare victory. He subjected his work to merciless scrutiny, testing every syllable against fresh tablets. When flaws emerged, he adjusted. Contrast that with the Voynich Manuscript's countless solutions, many of which cherry-pick data or ignore inconvenient symbols. True decipherment is a grind, counting glyph frequencies, mapping grammatical patterns, and most importantly, admitting when the evidence isn't there yet. The next time you hear a headline claiming an ancient script has been solved, listen for the caveats. Does the theory explain all the symbols or just a cherry-picked few? Does it fit the archaeological context or force artifacts into a preconceived narrative? And most crucially, has it convinced experts in the field or just captivated the press? The past doesn't give up its secrets easily, but that's what makes the real breakthroughs so extraordinary. They're not flashes of lone genius. They're the slow, collective work of countless minds, testing, doubting, and finally, when the stars align, understanding. Imagine a 19th century scholar hunched over a Mayan codex, convinced these intricate glyphs couldn't possibly represent real writing because, in his mind, only civilizations like Greece or Egypt had achieved such sophistication. This wasn't just academic skepticism, it was cultural blinders in action. For generations, the study of ancient scripts was shadowed by an unspoken hierarchy. If a text didn't resemble Latin or Greek, it was often dismissed as primitive picture writing or, worse, the work of mysterious others who couldn't possibly have developed complex thought. The consequences of these biases weren't just theoretical. They delayed breakthroughs for decades, distorting our understanding of entire civilizations. Take the Maya glyphs. Early explorers assumed they were astrological symbols or religious icons, largely because they couldn't fathom indigenous Mesoamerican cultures possessing literature, history, or science as nuanced as Europe's. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that scholars like Yuri Norisov and Tatyana Proskoryakov challenged this view, proving the glyphs encoded a full writing system, complete with puns, poetry, and royal genealogies. The real shock: Mayan scribes had been using phonetic principles akin to Egyptian hieroglyphs all along, but Western scholars had refused to see it. This wasn't just a failure of methodology. It was a failure of imagination, rooted in colonial-era prejudices that equated complexity with whiteness. The same biases plagued the study of Rongorongo, Easter Island's enigmatic script. Many early researchers, steeped in racist myths about the island's decline, argued the glyphs were mere imitations of European writing, a desperate attempt by a dying culture to mimic superior literacy. Never mind that Rongorongo's structure bore no resemblance to any known European script, or that its symbols were deeply integrated into Polynesian artistic traditions. The assumption that indigenous people couldn't innovate independently led to decades of dead-end theories, from fanciful claims about lost Atlantis to dismissals of the script as mere decoration. Only recently have scholars begun collaborating with Rapa Nui descendants, treating Rongorongo not as a puzzle for outsiders to solve, but as a living heritage to be understood on its own terms. Modern decipherment is learning from these mistakes. Today's linguists actively seek out indigenous perspectives, recognizing that oral traditions and cultural context can offer clues no statistical analysis ever could. When researchers studying the Andean quipu knotted chords used by the Inca teamed up with Quechua communities, they discovered the chords weren't just numeric records, as once assumed. Some likely encoded narratives, songs, or even territorial maps, with colors and not directions carrying meanings preserved in oral histories. Similarly, collaborations with Maya elders have revealed glyphs representing concepts absent from Spanish or English, like kayaks, a word blending eat, pain, and sacrifice, a term that colonial-era scholars might have flattened into something unrecognizable. The shift isn't just ethical, it's practical. Eurocentric approaches often misread symbols by forcing them into familiar categories. Early attempts to translate Etruscan, for example, assumed it was a dialect of Latin, leading to laughable errors until scholars accepted its unique structure. Likewise, the Indus Valley script's brevity was once cited as proof of its primitive nature until researchers realized its symbols might have been mnemonics for oral performances, like notes in a musical score. Dismissing this as not real writing says more about our narrow definitions than ancient capabilities. The stakes go beyond academic accuracy. When we impose modern biases on ancient texts, we don't just misread words, we erase worldviews. A Mayan glyph for time isn't just a calendar marker. It reflects a cyclical concept of existence alien to Western linearity. The Inca quipu's knots aren't mere accounting. They embody a tactile, three-dimensional way of thinking that challenges our reliance on flat, alphabetic writing. By acknowledging these differences, we don't just decipher scripts, we reclaim voices that were silenced not by time, but by the arrogance of those who couldn't imagine intelligence outside their own mirror. The lesson is clear: to hear the past, we must first unlearn the present. That means humbly accepting that some scripts may never fit our frameworks, and that's okay. The Voynich Manuscript's resistance to translation isn't a failure. It's a reminder that human communication is vast, strange, and wonderfully irreducible. As we peel away layers of bias, we're not just solving puzzles. We're rebuilding bridges to minds that thought differently, spoke differently, and saw the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. The pursuit of a lost language isn't just an intellectual challenge, it's an emotional marathon, one that consumes lives as fiercely as any obsession. Jean-Francois Champollion didn't merely study the Rosetta Stone, he bled for it. For years, he labored in a haze of exhaustion, his health crumbling under the weight of sleepless nights and relentless scrutiny. Rivals dismissed his work as fantasy, and the French Academy mocked his methods. Yet he pressed on, driven by a conviction that hieroglyphs were more than art, they were speech frozen in stone. When he finally collapsed, his body broken by fever and fatigue, his last words were said to be a whispered plea for more time. The tragedy: he died at 41, just as his life's work was reshaping history. Michael Ventress's story is no less haunting. The architect who cracked Linear B was a man of quiet intensity, poring over symbols in lamplight long after his drafting work was done. His breakthrough proving Mycenaean Greeks wrote an early form of Greek should have been a triumph. Instead, it became a weight. Plagued by depression and the pressure of academic skepticism, Ventress died in a car crash at 34, a death many believe was deliberate. The cruelest twist: his decipherment, once mocked, is now foundational to classical studies. He never lived to see his vindication. These aren't isolated cases. Alice Kober, the unsung hero of Linear B, filled 40 notebooks with painstaking grids of symbols. Her hands shaking from malnutrition as wartime rationing left her surviving on tea and crackers. She died at 43, her work unfinished, her name nearly erased from the story she helped write. Even Georg Friedrich Grotefend, the school teacher who first deciphered Persian cuneiform, spent decades defending his findings against scholars who refused to believe an amateur could outthink them. What drives someone to sacrifice so much for a script no one else can read? It's more than curiosity. It's a kind of love, an ache to hear voices silenced by time. Every decipherer knows the torment of almost understanding, of feeling a language's rhythm just beyond reach. The late Assyriologist Miguel Civil spoke of dreaming in Babylonian, of waking with fragments of dead words on his tongue. That intimacy comes at a cost: isolation, obsession, the gnawing fear that the puzzle might outlast you. Yet for all the heartbreak, these stories aren't tragedies. They're testaments to the raw human hunger for connection, to reach across millennia and whisper, "I hear you." When Champollion's nephew found him slumped over his notes, the man who'd resurrected hieroglyphs was surrounded by sketches of birds and suns, symbols he'd taught the world to read again. In that moment, the divide between past and present wasn't just crossed, it ceased to exist, and perhaps that's the real reward, fleeting as it is. Not fame, not certainty, but the fleeting, electric joy of listening when the past finally answers back. Even as we celebrate the triumphs of decipherment, vast territories of the ancient world remain stubbornly silent. Linear A, the older cousin of the deciphered Linear B, taunts scholars from thousands of clay tablets scattered across Crete and the Aegean. Its symbols share shapes with Linear B, but the language they encode is utterly alien, possibly a pre-Greek tongue, lost when Mycenaean invaders swept through. The frustration is palpable. We can almost taste the meaning, like a word on the tip of the tongue, yet the grammar, the sounds, the very soul of the language dances just out of reach. Some believe it's related to Etruscan or the hypothetical Minoan language. Others argue it's a linguistic isolate, a dead end with no living relatives. The only certainty, until another bilingual key emerges, perhaps a ship's manifest scribbled in Linear A and Phoenician, or a trader's ledger mixing symbols with Egyptian hieratic, this script will keep its secrets. Then there's Proto-Elamite, the world's oldest undeciphered writing system, pressed into clay tablets in Iran around 3100 BCE. Older than the pyramids, these tablets feature numerical notations and enigmatic symbols that may represent commodities like grain or livestock. The script's complexity is maddening. Over 1,000 distinct signs, some abstract, others resembling animals or tools. Early attempts to link it to later Elamite cuneiform failed. The two scripts share no clear lineage. Recent imaging technology has revealed hidden markings beneath the tablet surfaces, suggesting scribes made corrections or drafts before the final impression. But without a Rosetta Stone-like parallel text, Proto-Elamite remains a locked vault of early Mesopotamian economics, its symbols whispering of trade networks and administrative systems we can only guess at. Venture to the Italian Alps, and you'll find the Camunic script carved into rocks by an Iron Age people who left no other written trace. About 200 inscriptions survive, many near ritual sites or hunting grounds. The symbols' stylized deer, weapons, and geometric patterns seem to blend writing with art. Some scholars argue it's a true alphabet, others a symbolic proto-writing. The most tantalizing clue, a handful of inscriptions appear alongside Latin, suggesting the Camuni persisted long enough to interact with Rome. Yet no bilingual text has surfaced, leaving these carvings as mute as the mountain winds that surround them. Halfway across the world, the Rongorongo of Easter Island continues to defy explanation. Unlike most undeciphered scripts, Rongorongo wasn't merely forgotten, it was actively destroyed. After European contact, missionaries burned most tablets as pagan artifacts, and the last literate islanders died without passing on their knowledge. Today, only 26 fragile examples survive. They're glyphs of crouching figures, plants, and celestial bodies arranged in reverse Boustrafedon. The few attempts to connect Rongorongo to Polynesian languages have yielded fragments, possible references to genealogies or chants, but no consensus. The cruelest irony, the very people who carved these texts may have left oral traditions that could unlock them, but colonial disruption severed that thread forever. Even older is the Vinca script, a series of symbols etched into Neolithic pottery from the Balkans, dating back over 7,000 years. Are these the earliest form of writing, predating Sumerian cuneiform by millennia, or are they potter's marks, ritual symbols, or simple ownership tags? The debate rages, with some pointing to the symbol's repetition and linear arrangements as proof of literacy, while others note the lack of longer texts or contextual clues. Without a time machine, we may never know if these markings represent the birth of writing or merely the human impulse to leave a mark. The quest to decipher these scripts isn't just academic. Each holds a piece of humanity's collective story: how taxes were levied in Elam's earliest cities, what prayers the Kamuni whispered to their mountain gods, how the Rapa Nui navigated their isolated world. Modern tools offer new hope. AI analyzes symbol frequencies, 3D imaging reveals worn-away strokes, and databases cross-reference scripts separated by continents. But technology alone isn't enough. Decipherment requires imagination, the willingness to entertain wild ideas, like Ventrus's Greek hypothesis for Linear B, or Nourasov's phonetic approach to Mayan glyphs. Perhaps the most humbling lesson is this: some scripts may never be read. The Indus Valley symbols, short and standardized, might encode a language with no living relatives. Proto-Elamite could be a bureaucratic shorthand, meaningless without its oral context, and the Voynich Manuscript, its pages may guard nonsense, an elaborate medieval hoax. Yet the attempt matters. Every scholar who pores over these texts, every algorithm that crunches their patterns, is sending a message to the past: we haven't forgotten you. We're still listening, so the next time you see a photo of a linear, a tablet, or a Rongorongo glyph, don't just see a puzzle, see a letter sealed for millennia, waiting for the right hand to break the wax. We may not yet have that hand, but we'll keep reaching. There's something magnetic about a script no one can read, a whisper from the past that refuses to be silenced. Think of the thrill when Indiana Jones deciphers a cryptic map, or when Robert Langdon in the Da Vinci Code cracks a centuries-old riddle. These stories tap into a deeper truth. Humanity is wired to solve mysteries, especially those written in ink, stone, or clay. But why? What is it about lost languages that grips our imagination so fiercely? Perhaps it's the sheer audacity of the challenge. Decipherment isn't just translation, it's time travel. When Jean-François Champollion stared at the Rosetta Stone, he wasn't just matching symbols to sounds. He was stepping into the sandals of an Egyptian scribe, hearing the rustle of papyrus, feeling the weight of a culture that hadn't breathed in millennia. Every cracked code is a resurrection, a moment when a shopkeeper's inventory, a king's boast, or a child's homework assignment suddenly flickers back to life. We crave these connections because they collapse time, making the distant past feel intimate, almost tactile. Pop culture understands this hunger. From national treasure to Tomb Raider, stories about ancient scripts sell because they promise more than adventure. They offer the illusion that history isn't fixed, that with enough cleverness, we can reach into the void and pull back something thought lost forever. The Voynich Manuscript's allure isn't just its mystery, It's the tantalizing possibility that someone, someday, might sit down and casually read aloud what was once gibberish. That moment of revelation when nonsense becomes narrative is the ultimate narrative payoff. But there's a darker edge to this fascination. Lost languages often belong to the vanquished, the erased. The Maya glyphs weren't just forgotten. They were suppressed by Spanish colonizers who burned codices and forbade their use. When scholars finally deciphered them, it wasn't just an academic triumph, it was a reckoning, a way to hear the voices colonialism tried to silence. The same goes for Rongorongo, its tablets reduced to kindling by missionaries. Our obsession with decipherment isn't just curiosity, it's a form of justice, a way to restore what was stolen. Yet for all its drama, the real magic of decipherment lies in its humility. The heroes of this story aren't always swashbuckling adventurers. They're often quiet, obsessive figures like Alice Cober, who filled notebooks with statistical grids, or Michael Ventris, an architect who worked by lamplight after his day job. Their triumphs remind us that history isn't unlocked with golden keys, but with patience, logic, and sometimes sheer stubbornness. So the next time you see a fragment of an unknown script, whether in a museum case or a movie montage, remember, it's not just a puzzle. It's a provocation, a dare from the past, asking if we're willing to listen closely enough to hear what it's been trying to say all along. Decoding a lost script isn't just an academic breakthrough, it's a political act. Take the case of the Maya glyphs. For centuries, their meaning was erased, first by Spanish colonizers who burned codices, then by scholars who dismissed them as primitive symbols. When linguists finally cracked the code in the 20th century, the revelation didn't just belong to textbooks. It reignited a cultural reawakening among modern Maya communities, who suddenly had access to their ancestors' histories, rituals, and even jokes. But this triumph came with thorny questions. Who gets to decide how these texts are interpreted? Should a German professor's translation of a sacred Mayan prayer be treated as definitive, or do the Maya people whose ancestors wrote it have the right to guide or even restrict its circulation? The tension between academic freedom and cultural ownership isn't theoretical. In Australia, indigenous groups have fought to keep sacred symbols and songs out of public databases, arguing that their meaning is tied to oral traditions outsiders can't fully grasp. Similarly, when the Zuni tribe of New Mexico asked museums to stop displaying ceremonial objects inscribed with their ancestral script, they weren't rejecting scholarship. They were asserting that some knowledge isn't meant to be divorced from its living context. For these communities, writing isn't just information. It's a bridge to the sacred, and not all bridges are meant to be crossed by everyone. Yet the opposite argument carries weight too. If the Rosetta Stone's decipherment had been restricted to modern Egyptians, would hieroglyphs have become the shared heritage of humanity? When Linear B was proven to encode Greek, it reshaped our understanding of European history, not just Greek identity. Knowledge, once unlocked, has a way of spiraling beyond borders, challenging the very idea of ownership. But where's the line between sharing and appropriation? Consider the Nahuatl language of the Aztecs. While scholars pore over colonial-era manuscripts to reconstruct it, some indigenous activists argue these texts are tainted by the Spanish priests who recorded them, filtering Nahuatl through a Eurocentric lens. The digital age has magnified these dilemmas. Online archives now host thousands of scanned inscriptions, from Babylonian tablets to Rongorongo glyphs, accessible to anyone with Wi-Fi. Is this democratization or a new form of cultural extraction? In Hawaii, debates rage over whether digitized Hawaiian language newspapers, written by native scholars after the U.S. overthrow of the monarchy, should be freely available or protected as part of a sovereign legacy. Meanwhile, AI tools trained on these texts risk reducing living traditions to data points, divorcing words from the people who breathed life into them. Perhaps the way forward lies in collaboration, not control. In Canada, the Inuit have partnered with linguists to revive their syllabic script, ensuring academic work serves community goals. In Mexico, Mixtec codices are being reinterpreted through both scholarly analysis and oral histories from elder speakers. These projects recognize that decipherment isn't just about solving puzzles, it's about restoring relationships. When a language is reclaimed, it's not just words that return. It's pride, memory, and the right to tell your own story. The ethics of ancient scripts force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Every act of translation is also an act of power. Whose voice gets amplified, whose interpretations are centered? The answers aren't in the texts themselves, but in how we choose to listen. And sometimes, the most profound decipherment isn't of symbols on stone, but of the responsibility we bear to the voices we resurrect. The future of deciphering lost languages no longer rests solely in the hands of solitary scholars squinting at parchment under lamplight. Today, an unprecedented alliance of artificial intelligence, global crowdsourcing, and interdisciplinary collaboration is rewriting the rules of the game, and the next century may witness breakthroughs we can barely fathom. Imagine an algorithm that scans 10,000 Indus Valley symbols in seconds, detecting subtle patterns invisible to the human eye, or a digital platform where linguists, archaeologists, and even amateur enthusiasts from Tokyo to Buenos Aires collectively puzzle over Rongorongo glyphs, pooling insights in real time. This isn't science fiction, it's already happening. Take the Vesuvius Challenge, where computer scientists and classicists teamed up to read carbonized scrolls from Herculaneum, texts so fragile they'd crumble if unrolled physically. Using particle accelerators and machine learning, they virtually peeled apart layers of ash-preserved papyrus, revealing Greek philosophy thought lost forever. Similarly, projects like Decipher apply neural networks to Linear A, training AI on known scripts to predict plausible grammatical structures. These tools don't replace human intuition, they amplify it, like giving a decipherer 1,000 pairs of eyes. But the real revolution may lie in crowdsourcing. Platforms like Zooniverse let anyone with internet access tag symbols or transcribe ancient ledgers, turning a global community into research assistants. When the British Library released thousands of undeciphered Maya glyphs online, a retired engineer in Oregon spotted a repeating pattern that experts had overlooked, proof that fresh perspectives matter. Even video games are getting in on the act. Heaven's Vault, a narrative-driven puzzle game, tasks players with reconstructing a fictional ancient language, honing skills that could transfer to real scripts. Interdisciplinary collaboration is tearing down academic silos. Chemists analyzing ink compositions can now trace trade routes of scribble materials, while botanists identify plant species depicted in undeciphered glyphs, offering clues to their meaning. In Switzerland, linguists work with quantum physicists using hyperspectral imaging to recover faded ink on medieval palimpsests, revealing texts erased centuries ago. And in Australia, Indigenous elders partner with data scientists to reconstruct lost Aboriginal languages from colonial-era word lists, blending cutting-edge tech with oral traditions. The most tantalizing possibilities lie ahead. Quantum computing could one day model every possible linguistic permutation of the Voynich Manuscript symbols in hours. Augmented reality might let archaeologists see reconstructed texts overlaid on crumbling monuments, and as DNA analysis advances, we could trace migrations of script-bearing cultures through genetic markers, linking linguistic families to ancestral homelands. Yet for all the tech, the heart of decipherment remains human, the thrill of connection across time. when an AI finally cracks Proto-Elamite or Linear A, it won't just solve a puzzle. It will hand us a mirror showing how much we still share with those who first pressed stylus to clay. The past's greatest secrets aren't hiding. They're waiting for the right combination of minds, machines, and stubborn curiosity to listen. Decoding lost languages isn't just an academic puzzle, it's an act of resurrection. Every time a script yields its secrets, it's not just symbols we're unlocking. It's laughter, grief, and the mundane chatter of daily life frozen in time. Take the humble laundry list scribbled on a Babylonian tablet. On the surface, it's a record of tunics and barley, but look closer and you're hearing a merchant sigh as he tallies debts, or a mother counting her children's winter clothes. These aren't artifacts, they're echoes. The Rosetta Stone didn't just give us hieroglyphs, it gave us pharaohs' boasts, lovers' poetry, and the complaints of tomb builders who scribbled on walls about their terrible pay. When Michael Ventris cracked Linear B, he didn't just translate inventory lists, he revealed Mycenaean clerks fretting over missing chariot wheels and olive oil shipments. These voices, silenced for millennia, suddenly had something to say, and that's the real magic of decipherment. It turns stone and clay into time machines, carrying us back to moments when these words were still warm on someone's lips. But here's the twist, we're not just passive listeners. Every breakthrough is a collaboration across centuries. Champollion stood on the work of Arabic scholars who'd studied hieroglyphs long before him. Alice Kober's painstaking grids became the foundation for Ventris's leap. Today, AI sifts through data at speeds no human could match, yet it still needs us to ask the right questions. This isn't a solo mission, it's a relay race with each generation passing the baton forward. And the race is far from over. For every Rosetta Stone, there's a Phaistos disc taunting us with its spirals, or a Rongorongo tablet whose glyphs seem to dance just out of reach. These unsolved scripts aren't failures, they're invitations. What if the next key lies in a child's doodle on a potsherd, or a trader's note buried in a shipwreck? The thrill isn't just in solving the puzzle, it's in the hunt, the moment when a hunch sparks into certainty. So why does it matter? Because language is more than communication, it's identity. When the Maya reclaimed their glyphs, it wasn't just about reading ancient texts, it was about stitching a cultural tapestry torn by colonization. When scholars fight to revive Gaulish or Etruscan, they're not just rebuilding vocabularies, they're restoring dignity to voices erased by conquest. Every deciphered word is a rebuttal to oblivion, proof that no civilization truly disappears if its words survive. As we peer into the future, the tools evolve, but the mission stays the same. AI, 3D imaging, global collaborations, they're all just new ways to listen. And the questions grow richer. Can we reconstruct the jokes in a Sumerian tavern? The lullabies sung by Minoan mothers, the arguments of Indus Valley merchants, the answers are out there, waiting in fragments. So the next time you see an ancient inscription, whether in a museum or a documentary, pause for a second. That's not just a relic, it's a message in a bottle tossed across oceans of time. And who knows, the hand that carved those symbols might be counting on you to hear it. After all, writing is humanity's oldest rebellion against silence. And as long as there are curious minds to unravel it, not a single word is ever true.